the film that changed AMC. AMC was called American Movie Classics, and they decided to do a miniseries, and it was a Western that Walter directed, Broken Trail, with Robert Duvall, and it was so successful that AMC became the home to other programs like Breaking Bad. It's due to the success of your show.
Well, I think it helped. I don't know that.
They woke up and said, wow, we're not going to run Lex Barker movies anymore. We're going to be running, new films. Welcome to A Word on Westerns. Today, one of my all-time favorite directors is here to visit with us. The Long Riders, Streets of Fire, Geronimo, Broken Trail, The Warriors, yes! Can you dig it? But we'll hear all about that in a minute when I introduce Walter Hill.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I don't know where to start because I've been a fan for a long time and I still am a fan. With Westerns, it's a nice feeling when you see familiar faces in the Westerns because those are the people that are real. We're talking about Ben Johnson and Dobie. Dobie had such a wonderful scene in The Long Riders where he's in the coach.
That was because of Lindsay Anderson. Lindsay introduced me a wonderful director who wrote a book about Ford. Mm-hmm. And Lindsay and I were friends. He asked me if I knew Dobie. I said no. He said, well, you're like John Ford. You got to talk to Dobie, of course. So he introduced us, and then he took me aside. He says, God damn it, write a scene for him in your next movie. So it was The Long Riders, and I did write a scene for him. And we did it a couple of times, but, movies.
Did you ever meet Ford?
I shook hands with him once. I have 3 autographs. I have in my years. I wish I'd gotten Hawks, who I've met, but I didn't. I have Lillian Gish, I have John Ford, and I have Kurosawa. Mr. Kurosawa sent me his autographed picture. It was a great thrill to me. Ford, I had been in Peter Bogdanovich's office, and Ford had visited his set on What's Up, Doc, and they had taken a lot of pictures of Ford. And I asked Peter, could I have one of them? He said, yeah, sure. And I said, you think if I send it to him, he'll autograph it? He said, well, kind of depends on the mood you're going to catch him in. If he's in his usual temper, he'll just throw it away. If he's, kind of okay, he'll sign it John Ford. If he's in a good mood or he kind of likes you for some reason, he'll sign it Jack. He said, but I'll tell you, he said, send him a very nice note. Send him a very complimentary, really do it up. So I wrote a screenwriter, Dear Mr. Ford, my pleasure to send you this picture, and I hope that maybe you could send me your autograph. I believe that your films will be studied for, centuries or so. I don't know what I said, but it was one of those.
It must have worked.
Yeah. But Peter had said, there's a real good chance that you're never going to hear from him. And I'll be a son of a bitch. 2 days later, I think I sent it off. 2 days later, it comes back. And I put the stamp thing in there and all that. 2 days later, it comes back, and I open it up, and it's to Walter with affection, Jack Ford. So I obviously caught him in a good mood.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's there on my wall, so in the office. So.
When I was 7, we were on vacation from Florida, pulling an Airstream trailer, and we were in Monument Valley, summer of 1955. The Searchers.
Searchers, yeah. That was...
My note from John Ford says, thanks for visiting our set, John Ford.
That's He didn't say Jack.
No, he didn't. So, well, we weren't very close. Jack. We weren't very close at the time. The Long Rider set is very unusual for several reasons. It's very realistic. The locations, the look of it, the dialogue, the relationships, it's so different from the other Jesse James Cole Younger films. And of course, you've got all the brothers playing the brothers in the film.
Yeah, it was it's an odd film in a lot of ways. It's not as narrative driven as most Westerns are and most of the Jesse James things are. It's a pastiche. The brother thing worked out very well. I'd love to tell you that it was my idea, my entrepreneurial genius, but I really didn't have anything to do with it. They had organized themselves, and
I think this is something that James and Stacy had been trying to put together for years.
Yeah, Jimmy had played Jesse in some off-Broadway play, and he had the rather obvious idea, I guess. He went to Stacy and said, you know, what we ought to do, I'll play Jesse again, and you can play Frank and all that kind of bit. And they were friends with the Carradines, and the Bridges were going to be in it, but that didn't work out. But we had the Quaids and the Guest brothers.
Mm-hmm. The score, Ry Cooder.
It was Ry's first formal score, full score, and it was his first one with me. We've done about 7 or 8 together, and it was a beautiful piece of work that he did. Yeah, very, very much of a certain time. I mean, to say by that, the roots of the score were very much in that part of the country and that part of the 19th century. Worked out quite well.
There's a scene where it's the first time I ever noticed James Remar with a Bowie knife fight with David Carradine. What a great scene that is.
It worked out. It was actually a kind of a mess when we were doing it. I have to give the great Sam Fuller credit on that. Sam and I were friendly. Bobby Carradine had played basically Sam Fuller in Sam's movie Big Red One, and Sam was in town. I used to mainly see Sam when I was in France, but he had a little house up off Woodrow Wilson, and we shot that scene at Warner Brothers, and we rehearsed and we shot in the morning. It was Christ, nothing was working, and I think I was not in one of my better moods, and I remember saying to David and Jimmy, I said, look, this stinks, and I don't know what the hell is. Maybe it's the goddamn routine, or maybe it's you guys, or maybe it's me or something, but there's nothing that we've done so far that looks worth a good goddamn. And Sam Fuller's coming to lunch, and I'm sure he'll come over to the set. And if I were you guys, I wouldn't want to be embarrassed this way. And so we broke for lunch, and Sam and I went off to the Warner Brothers commissary there. Anyway, we came back and said, so I was, well, Sam, we're doing a knife fight here, and we're, he was, and so line everybody up, I yell action, and the two guys almost kill each other. I mean, it's a fabulous. They don't miss a trick on the routine. The intensity is great. And they didn't want to look bad in front of Sam Fuller. So,
did he stay the rest of the shoot?
I could have kept him around, absolutely. But
there's that great line that Belle Starr has. It says, I am having a good time. Just the rhythm. It was that was a nice relationship she had with Cole Younger too, David's character.
Well, yes, the semi-hooker with who, we wanted a character that stood up for herself. I mean, historically that was true anyway, and it worked out. It was a good piece of work, I thought. The whole movie was, it's an odd movie. It's character-driven around events, and yet it's an ensemble without And I guess the theme of it is really, what you sow, you reap. And as Cole Younger says, we played a rough game and lost, and they end up sadder but wiser, or dead. And we were trying photographically to do something a little different. And so it's a pretty movie. It's great to see Stephanie. I usually only see her across 4 tables in a restaurant. And,
who's got the A table? I don't know.
And she does, deservedly. And but you guys talking about Bob Totten, who I knew years ago, Warren Oates, who was a friend, Dobie Carey, who was in, I think, 3 of my movies. And so, these are old friends.
The film that changed AMC. AMC was called American Movie Classics, and they decided to do a miniseries, and it was a Western that Walter directed, Broken Trail, with Robert Duvall, and it was so successful that AMC became the home to other programs like Breaking Bad, and it's due to the success of your show.
Well, I think it helped. I don't know that.
They woke up and said, wow, we're not going to run Lex Barker movies anymore. We're going to be running, new films.
Yeah, we shot it up in Canada. It was a bit of a mixed shoot. I think I loved it. I mean, I loved shooting up there, and the Chinese girls were wonderful, and Tom Hayden Church was,
he was terrific.
He won an Emmy. And
I think you won an Emmy too, didn't you, for that?
I did,
yes.
And so did Mr. Duvall.
He's irascible, though.
Well, my hesitation about this has to do with Bob and I did not get along very well. So I have great respect for him.
You'd already worked with him in Geronimo.
I did, and we got along actually quite well on that. But somehow the magic went away on this one. And but he's very good in it. He's a wonderful actor. I don't usually even say these things, Rob, but you've
draw them out.
Pull this out of me
because we're having fun talking.
Listen, I have great respect for him as an actor, and, but we did have a few moments, I will say.
Well, I know that you're known for the great action set pieces that you have in all of your movies, and he's known for his pontificating, perhaps, his, it's a different...
I don't think that's the word he would use. But
it seemed to work, the final cut.
He is looking for the spoken word, usually. Yes, that's true.
Maybe that's a kinder way.
And he'd say, then, God damn it, we don't need another goddamn violent scene. I know that's what you want to do.
Let's sit around the campfire and talk instead.
So, listen, he's very good in it. I don't want to belabor it or anything.
Everybody, I thought, was good in that. The villains were mean, and you really were able to create some nice set pieces. Thomas Hayden Church, who knew that he was such a good hand.
Well, Tom has his own ranch down in Texas, and he loves Westerns, and he'd rarely had a chance to be in one, and he was, he was very good. He really did a wonderful job. I always said it was his haircut. The very first scene, he takes his hat off, and he's got that shorn on the sides up to here, and he had decided. I told him we've established the character now, and we don't.
Well, it kind of made him geeky.
Now, if we don't have to, Duvall accused me of upstaging. With the gesture, upstaging his part when Tom Hayden takes his hat off. Years and years ago, before I was a director, I got a chance to meet Raoul Walsh. I had written a script that had turned out to be a hit movie. And
what was that?
It was called The Getaway. It was with Steve McQueen and
Ally McGraw, little films.
And Sam Peckinpah directed.
I'm sorry I was late. I was having my hair done and the girl was slow.
You look fine.
Where do you want to go?
Straight ahead. Hang it, Raoul, folks!
And I had dedicated, because it was rather like an old High Sierra, an old Raoul Walsh film. I had dedicated the script to Raoul Walsh, and somebody had said, well, Jesus, that's kind of nice, you know, why don't you send it to him? he isn't part of the distribution, you know. So I did, and he sent back a letter. Actually, his wife wrote it. He was so blind that he really couldn't write very well. And so he dictated a letter that his wife wrote. And basically they said, you know, call and come out and see us sometime. So I took advantage of that. And anyway, and he was still, even though he was, I would say, 95% blind, he was rolling his own cigarettes still, and which is a pretty good feat for having two good eyes. But he'd roll, but he would smoke regular cigarettes too. He had like some Pell Mell or some, you know, some tough
man's cigarette,
some tough guy cigarette. But he'd smoke those, and then he'd roll one every once in a while. And I remember and I said to him as I was saying goodbye, you know, I'd like to direct someday, and any advice, you know, and he was rolling. He said, well, he kind of nudged me, and he was wearing a Western hat. He said, well, I probably shouldn't say this. He said, don't screw the leading lady. But he said, if you do, don't stop halfway through the movie. And then he said, let the actors choose their own hats. I said, what? He said, actors. He said, let them choose their hats. He said, you know, hats are a funny thing. If you wear a hat that you're not comfortable with, you think you look bad. He said that they can't give a good performance if they think they look like hell. He said most people will pick an attractive hat for themselves, or an actor will pick within the character of. He said sometimes you have to go in there and straighten it out, but you know they like to have their own say so. He says let them pick their own hat, makes them feel good.
Somebody should have picked Daniel Craig's hat in Cowboys and Aliens. I'll say that. You know?
Well, it's not 100 like everything. It's not 100%.
Where's Luster Bayless when you need him? You know.
And then the other thing he said is save your money. And I thought, well, that's kind of Ben Franklin advice or something. But I realized later that it was wiser than I was 30 years old or something, didn't know much, but. What he was trying to tell me was it's the only freedom you get. You know, if you don't want to, we're all trying to make a living in all this, and you're trying to do good work. Your ability to turn things down to do things you really want to do is kind of dependent on your financial condition. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have to be staggeringly well off or anything, but if you have the ability to say no, you're free. Mm-hmm. You can pursue the dream. Want me to tell you a story Bud Boetticher told me? I knew Bud, great director of Westerns, and he told me this story. He said he had gone out to Warner Brothers. He had some business, had lunch with Bat Jack John Wayne, and they were talking about doing some film. And Wayne says to him, he says, go over to stage 11, or he said, the old man's shooting over there. And he was doing, I think it was Sergeant Rutledge. And Boetticher knew Ford. They had been friendly for a number of years.
Yeah, Ford had taken Bullfighter and the Lady and hacked that up, right?
Yeah, and so anyway, he goes over to stage 11, and he walks in, and there's utter silence, which is rare, as you know, on a movie set. Utter silence. And as Bud said, the entire cast, everybody on the call sheet is sitting there in costume, sitting there quietly in their chairs, and they're lighting a shot, but the crew is working very quietly. Ford is sitting. Bud thinks, well, this is not the usual atmosphere of motion picture. Anyway, he thinks, what the hell? He walks over and he looks at Ford and says, hey, Jack, how are you? Ford glares at him, looks away. And he says, well, he knows that Ford can't see very well, so he says, it's Bud, Jack, Bud Boetticher. Good to see you. Ford stares at him, looks away. And Boetticher thinks, well, what the hell, you know? So he walks off the stage, and he's wounded because they're old friends. And so he thinks, Christ, you know, it's 2 o'clock. Ford always quits at 4:30 or some 5 o'clock. He said, I'm going to stand, you know, what the hell, what did I do so wrong that is gotten me treated this way? So he says, I'm gonna hang around. I'll wait for him. His car will pull up outside the stage. I'll jump in there. So sure enough, 4:45 or something, Ford's car comes up. Ford comes out, you know, and Boetticher goes right over and says, hey, Jack. And Ford looks at him, hey, Bud, how are you? Good to see you, Bud. And he says, well, what the hell, Jack? What was that in there? He said, that. He said, I just didn't want the actors to think I had any friends. Which seems to me to be a quintessential John Ford attitude.
I just went to a double feature of The Warriors and Streets of Fire, and beautiful prints for both, and the audience went nuts, and they were wearing Warriors jackets that they had made. It was terrific, and you were there speaking, and what was the feeling like?
Well, it's kind of amazing, you know, you do something 35 years ago, and people still want to see it. It makes you feel good, I have to admit, but it's, you know, when you're doing them, you don't ever think anything like that's going to happen. You just hope it's going to find an audience at the time, so it's a good feeling.
To me, it seems like it's a Western. I screened it at my house one time years ago for Dobie Carey in Maryland. They hadn't seen it. And I said, you got to see the fight. You got to see the baseball furies.
I told Sam Fuller, it was Run of the Arrow, that I had borrowed his plot, but it was from a novel by Saul Urich. It was a very free adaptation. I don't know. If you make something that's very basic, they're all... the great South American writer Borges said there are only 2 plots, really, and the Crucifixion and the Odyssey, and they're all variations of... which I guess means if you make your categories broad enough, you can fit anything in. But... yeah, it was fun to do. It was a very low-budget movie. The studio hated me. And
the casting was great. It was a fantasy, but they seemed real. The baseball furies, they come on. Everything driven by the music. The Barry Dvorak, it just propelled everything.
Job, yeah. Wow. And it's based on the, a true incident in the history of the Greeks, the Xenophon's March of the 10,000 across the Anatolian plain. And Urich took that historical incident, turned it into a novel that took place in Gangland, New York. And I then made more of a fantasy of it. So, I don't know, had there been no Xenophon, there would be no Warriors, and no Saul Urich, there would be no Warriors.
Well, it must have been fun coming up with the names of the different tribes of gangs that were out there, too.
Well, yeah, we just spitballed around. The movie now plays, it was so perceived to be, at the moment when it came out, a dark and dangerous.
Well, it caused riots in the theaters, too.
And now it looks more like a musical than it does. And it gets, I'm happy to say, in the laugh lines, we do get laughs still. And, it's the trickiest thing. You always want to get some humor into these things. And
everything works. The close-ups of the lips of the DJ.
Well, it's funny how things, I believe this about being a director, that first place, it's a great privilege. And you get to work with very talented people. But how do you approach it? And I think sometimes you can over-approach it. I think go with your instincts, go with, and that scene, we were rained out, and that was a cover set. And we were just, and cover sets don't usually work very well. And so I said, shove it in. And just the more I watched her do it, I just kept saying, get closer, get closer. And then it became and it was turned out to be one of the most remembered things about the movie, I think. She was a great actress, Lynn Thigpen. It's a funny business. People come in, they work for you, you meet them a couple of days, they go away. I mean, you're like you're in the circus or something, and you say goodbye, and they give you so much, and you do your best for them, and you don't always hug them and kiss them and all that, but not to appreciate what they give is.
Well, you've given us so much over the years, and we look forward to a lot more too, Walter.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
The motion picture is done in true Dead for a Dollar, writer and director Walter Hill.
Too kind. It was such a pleasure this morning. Flew in last night. I look over at breakfast, and I see Bobby Carradine. 44 years ago, I did my first Western, and Bobby was a very prominent actor. And before we started shooting, he came to me and thanked me for hiring me. And he said that he was going to give us Carradine acting and Carradine horsemanship. He's always been a confident fellow. And after one very particularly difficult horseback scene, I found myself standing next to one of the wranglers. And I said to the wrangler, I said, I think Bobby's the best horseman in our cast. Randy looked at me, said, well, hell, Walter, he can ride better than any of the wranglers. Well, anyway, it's great to see you. You're back. Well, great to be here for Dead for a Dollar. My thanks to the Western Heritage Awards and to the good people of Oklahoma. Pleasure to be here, accept this award, in my case, for the third time. I'm a lucky guy, and on this one I was fortunate enough to have a splendid cast and crew to tell the story with. They put up with me with great patience. I am eternally indebted to them. Obviously, I like Westerns. I think I've made 6 of them now. Obviously, I like Westerns. Obviously, all of you like Westerns. I believe they generally tell good stories that demonstrate self-reliance and proper ethical codes. I think we can use those in our country always. I'd like to thank Carolyn McMaster, our producer, who really made the film possible. Special thanks to my wife, Hildy, and my 2 daughters, who for many years have tolerated me with great fortitude. Again, I thank you, and I just finished a new script, and it's a Western. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rob Word. I hope you enjoyed A Word on Westerns. It's an interview series we do. We post a new one every single week. If you missed any, just sign up for this little baby right here. Whoa.